This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, we've got some unexpected good news out of a swing state, Minnesota. Can you speak on what just happened in that state?
Yeah, great news. Both chambers of the Minnesota legislature, led by Democrats, passed a Minnesota Voting Rights Act. All that is left is for the governor to sign it, and Governor Walz is a true pro-democracy governor, and this will be landmark for the people of Minnesota. It will be an example for many, many states in this country to follow.
Now, is there any impediment, any legal impediment that could prevent this from becoming law?
No. I mean, look, this is the thing. Elections have consequences. And Minnesota's legislature for many, many years was divided between Democrats and Republicans. And finally, Democrats took control of both houses of the legislature as well as the governorship. And the result will be that the people of Minnesota are going to have landmark voting rights legislation take effect. Governor Walz has already signed a number of other expansive voting rights laws that the legislature have passed, including restoring the voting rights of over 55,000 individuals who had been disenfranchised with previous felony convictions. That was the Democracy for the People Act. This is the Minnesota Voting Rights Act. This is unadulterated good news for Minnesota, and I hope all of the other Democratic governors and legislators are paying attention.
Now, I would also argue that this is even more significant given what happened in light of the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. So can you talk about what happened at that circuit court and why it makes this especially important?
Right. So this is especially critical because remember, the Eighth Circuit, which is a very, very conservative circuit. You and I have talked a lot about the Fifth Circuit, which includes Texas. We've talked a lot about the 11th Circuit, which includes Florida. But boy, the Eighth Circuit is on a pound for pound basis one of the most uniformly conservative anti-voting circuits in the country, and it is the circuit that took away the private right of action for individuals and for voting rights advocates and groups to enforce the Federal Voting Rights Act. So remember, we talked about this terrible ruling that came out of the Eighth Circuit that said that only the Department of Justice can enforce the Federal Voting Rights Act. This is a catastrophe for minorities and other voters protected by the Voting Rights Act. But the good news is in Minnesota, which is in the Eighth Circuit, there is now state-level remedies, and the state courts in Minnesota are prepared to enforce this Voting Rights Act within that state.
So basically, with these attacks in the Eighth Circuit, for example, it precludes private rights of action. So only the DOJ can enforce violations of the Voting Rights Act. But when you have these state-level Voting Rights Act, does it re-allow for private litigants to file lawsuits against violations of the Voting Rights Act?
Absolutely. What it does is it creates a state-level equivalent of the Federal Voting Rights Act, and this law will explicitly enable individuals and voting rights groups and organizations to be the private plaintiffs, because there is a private right of action. And, Governor Walz deserves credit on another front, which is the appointments he's made to the Minnesota courts have been outstanding. That's on top of the great appointments that we saw by the prior Democratic governor, Mark Dayton. So the Minnesota courts are well positioned to fully empower these voters and voting rights groups who bring these claims. And so at least within the borders of Minnesota, there will be alternate relief to going to federal court.
Mark, how many states have state-level Voting Rights Act now?
Yeah, so only a handful. You've got California, Washington, Oregon, Virginia, New York, and Connecticut are the states that have them. But we ought to be looking every state that has a trifecta, which means Democratic-controlled legislature and Democratic governors, ought to be enacting a state-level VRA, and the states that have them ought to be expanding them. Democracy is never done. The task of protecting democracy against right-wing election denialism and conservative and Republican assaults on democracy can never be a finished project. So we need every state that's able to upgrade its election laws.
Where are other state-level Voting Rights Acts pending right now?
Maryland and New Jersey are right now considering it, and I encourage them to enact these laws. We've seen other states, though, like Michigan, not a state VRA, but expand their voting laws. So, like I said, there's lots of different forms this can take, and I encourage everyone to do all of the above. And don't forget, in Ohio, my law firm and others are fighting for an expansive voting rights amendment to be on the ballot to allow better voting laws there. Democracy Docket has been covering, Minnesota has been covering all of these laws.
And of course, to read more about this stuff in Democracy Docket, I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're not yet signed up, please sign up. Trust me, it is the most useful resource you'll find as it relates to all of this stuff. Mark, to that point then, what would be the impact of a national voting rights, piece of legislation to actually strengthen the Federal Voting Rights Act?
Okay, let me look straight into the camera and tell everyone out there. We need a federal Voting Rights Act strengthening bill. The John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act came really close to becoming law. It passed the House of Representatives last Congress, not this one, but the one when Democrats were in control, without a single Republican vote. It came very close to passing the Senate, but was unable to overcome the filibuster, which for time and time again has been the obstacle to full enfranchisement and democracy in this country. It has to be the top priority, and I know it will be for a re-elected President Biden, a re-elected or kept Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and a new Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, to bring this vital piece of legislation up. It is great that we see states taking up the mantle of passing state-level Voting Rights Act laws. But that is not a substitute for Congress passing a national bill to protect all Americans from coast to coast and from Texas to Minnesota under one law. So please, everyone, keep up that pressure. Make sure that as you go to the ballot box this November, you are voting for pro-voting candidates, and that is the Democrats up and down the ballot. Tell your neighbors and your friends that whatever issue they may care most about, they are not going to see progress unless we elect Democrats up and down the ballot, and they are able to enact new legislation to protect voting rights for all Americans.
And I would add too, for those folks who say, well, look, Democrats had majorities before. They had majorities in the previous Congress during Joe Biden's first term. They had majorities, even larger ones, when Obama was first elected into office. The fact is that the filibuster has prevented any of this stuff from passing. You need a 60-vote threshold in the Senate to be able to pass anything. We had two Democratic senators, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, neither one of whom will be in the Senate after this year. They'll be, hopefully Kyrsten Sinema is replaced by Ruben Gallego, and then if we hold on to all of the other Democrats who are defending swing seats in the Senate, John Tester in Montana, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, then we can have a 50-50 Senate. And if Joe Biden wins, then Kamala Harris will be the tiebreaker. Then we have enough votes to eliminate the filibuster. Republicans have already eliminated the filibuster for all of their priorities. There is no filibuster for confirming judges, which was Mitch McConnell's top priority for his entire life, and for changes to the tax code, which means that they can impose tax cuts on the ultra-wealthy. Those are the two things Republicans care about. There is no filibuster for those things. So if we want some equity here, if we want to be able to eliminate the filibuster so that we can actually pass progressive legislation, then we need to hold on to the Senate. We need to obviously win the House, and we need to have Joe Biden reelected. So for those saying, look, Democrats had the ability to do it before, they didn't. But they can now if we're able to maintain our majorities in both houses of Congress and the presidency.
Yeah, and let me amplify one of the points you made there so eloquently. When it came to judges, which, as you say, is the only thing Mitch McConnell really cares about was judges. They changed all kinds of rules. I mean, think about the rules they changed. They changed the filibuster rules, sure. But they also changed the rules and the norms about, they refused to confirm at the end of President Obama's term a new justice because they said it was too close to the election. Then Donald Trump, when he, at the end of his, right before his loss, on an even tighter time frame, they changed the rule again to be able to confirm Justice Comey Barrett.
People had already voted. There were votes that had already been cast in that election.
Yeah, so they've been willing to do anything, and I mean literally anything, change any rule, any norm to affect the courts. Democracy is at stake. Democracy is at stake. Democracy is on the ballot this November. Democracy desperately needs new voting rights legislation. So it is high time that become the top priority.
And of course, just a reminder for folks watching right now, Mark and his team are defending democracy on a daily basis in the courts right now. So to support the invaluable work that he and his team are doing right now, please sign up for Democracy Docket. Again, I'll put the link right here on the screen, also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.